Okay, with that, I think we're going to get started because I haven't seen anyone come in a few minutes. So yeah, so thanks for joining me on your lovely Thursday afternoon. I know it's pretty nice out there, so hopefully I can teach you something exciting. So we're going to start by asking you guys a couple questions. So who is the main audience of your website? Who is your secondary audience? What information do I want to present? And what are the goals of the website? So for this, you really need to consider if you want to sell something, if you want to market a product, if you want to give out information, if you want people to sign up for something. These are the kinds of things you should consider, the first intro kind of questions, because these will really help you determine the direction of your site and what you need to build and what you don't need to build, and what platforms and things you should use to do such building. So, and then the biggest question is, what is the purpose of my website? So why am I actually building a website? Do I want to just have a website? Do I want people to sign up for something? Do I want to contact my customers? That's the question you kind of need to answer. So let's start off with the ground floor. So the foundation of building a website. So the first thing you think of with a site is a domain name. So that's the center of your brand. It's the primary point of contact for your website. So this is what your typical domain name kind of looks like. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be providing the slides, so don't feel you need to take notes or anything. I've got a resources section in the back of my slide deck, so all of the stuff will be there if you need to see it later. So yeah, so back to the domain. So there's all kinds of different parts of a domain. So the first is the protocol. So this is how the information is actually served. So for you guys, you've probably seen this in your browser before, HTTPS. That implies that your communication is encrypted from the user to the server. So for that, that's really important if you do anything like e-commerce or any kind of information collection online, because if this is the case, then anything that's sent in transit will be encrypted. So then you have your actual domain name and your subdomain. So the subdomain I like to think of as like a floor selector on an elevator. So there's a bunch of different floors in your house, so to speak, right? The domain name itself is your house, and then the subdomain is your floor. Most sites default to a www domain, whether you see it or not in the browser. That's actually where you're going when you visit most websites. But if you want to have other sites under your site, that's the place to put it. So for an example, so if you're opening a business that has a shop aspect, you might do shop.mystore.com and then browse or like home or something else for your main store activities if you're not primary activities and selling stuff. And then the top level domains, that's your .com. So up until recently, you probably heard of .com, .ca, .biz, .info, and a couple others. There are now, I think, a couple hundred top level domains that have been instituted in 2015. So you can find all kinds of cool stuff. And to get on that topic, let's talk about where you can actually buy domains. So one of the search tools that I use is called Domainer. And what's nice about this is you can punch in a keyword and it'll give you a bunch of domains and it'll update on the fly as you enter text. But it will also do things like domain hacks. So one of the new top level domains is .se. So if I'm creating a website for myself, I might do alexrayfew.se and have my full name as the domain. So that's what's known as a domain hack. And people are starting to use that to get short brand names as domains that aren't available as .coms, because most .coms have been squatted for many years now. Anything under 5 letters is really hard to find. And then if that doesn't work for you, I've got Namecheap. So what Namecheap allows you to do is bulk domain searching. So you can set price limits, where you want to purchase things from, what top level domains you want, all that kind of stuff. Pretty great tool. Okay, so now that you have a domain name for your business, you're gonna need a place to put it. So hosting is where your site actually lives. So your website, whether you realize it or not, is running on a computer in some closet in some server farm in the middle of the desert somewhere. That computer is called a server, and its main purpose is to serve your website to visitors. So whenever anyone visits your site, that server spins up and sends off a couple of requests and sends you a page. So obviously the server that you use for your website really does matter, because it is the kind of the thing that's driving your website. The same way that the type of engine in your car matters. So that being said, there's obviously different levels and types of hosting. Right, so shared hosting is kind of your cheap entry level, personal project level hosting. So what shared hosting is, you basically take a server, split it across thousands of different websites. It's running a lot of different sites and it's probably pushed right to capacity. But what that allows the providers to do is charge something like under $5 a month to host your website. Some of them $10 a year, $15 a year. So it can get very, very cheap. The next level up is a virtual private server. So that's taking a computer and cutting it into like 4 or 5 smaller computers and kind of giving you access to one of them. So it gives you a lot more overhead in terms of speed and reliability with your site, and you're not sharing it with a bunch of other people. So if, for example, if Leslie makes a website that's really, really crappy and loads slow, it's not going to affect Maya's website that's blazing fast, because her site's going to live on its own independent server. And then dedicated hosting. So this is the big leagues. You've got the whole box to yourself. You might even have a couple servers. This is for like if you have a high processing website or high traffic website. So think any like software as a service type applications. Like if you have a web app, you might want it to run on a dedicated machine just so your users have a fast experience. And then finally, we've got something a little bit different that just entered the market recently. It's called cloud hosting. So you've probably heard of Amazon, AWS, or Google Cloud, or any of these platforms. And what that is, it's kind of a different beast. So instead of your website running on a server, you're actually running your website on Google's or Amazon's entire infrastructure. So what that allows is infinite scalability and reliability, because your website won't go down. It's not actually hosted anywhere. It's hosted on a series of clusters. Your visitors, if they visit from Asia, they'll be served from Asian servers. If they visit from Australia, they'll be served from Australian servers. So it's really good for speed and reliability and that kind of thing. The downside is obviously the price. It's very expensive to run, and that kind of leaves it more for like the businessy, enterprisey level services. But that being said, there are still places where it's applicable. So yeah, so this is kind of the breakdown of where I see these different hosts fitting. My personal recommendation is to get a VPS. You can get them pretty cheap. And if not, shared hosting is okay. And later I talk about some recommendations for hosting where shared providers that aren't bad kind of live. So yeah, so and then let me say, if anyone has any questions, just interrupt me and we can get chatting about any of this.
Maya has a question there, Alex.
Yeah, what's up?
I run in the chat.
Oh, is there? Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me pull up the chat. I'm sharing my screen, so I can't really see all of the stuff. What's the average price of cloud hosting? Depends. It's all based on scalability and usability. So for every time your site's loaded, all of the bandwidth that you use, that's going to be determining your cost.
So more users or like more visits to the website would create a higher cost?
Yeah, your costs are purely based on variable expenses rather than like there's no fixed expenses per month or anything like that.
Oh.
There's a couple caveats there. I'm going to show you a couple cheaper options for cloud hosting as well, but that's kind of the overall rule.
Cool.
Okay, so now that we've talked about hosting a little bit, let's talk about page structure. So this is kind of how your site's actually going to be laid out, and it's pretty important to do this before you actually start building, because this is how messes are made and spaghetti code is created. So how are the pages linked together? What page goes to the other? How do you navigate through the site? Really think about that. How many pages do you need for your site? Do you need an about page and a team page, or can they be one web page? Do you need a services page as well as individual services, or can they all live on that one index page? Those kinds of questions are the ones you need to consider. And then where does the user go next? So one of my philosophies for building websites is that the user should always have an action that they can do that's immediate, that's obvious. So at the bottom of the page, that might mean a call to action that takes them to a different page, a different product, a related product, or a mailing list. It might be a button that takes them back to the top of the page to go to a different navigation item. But whatever it is, it should encourage them to stay on your website as long as possible. Because your objective with this is to reduce your bounce rate. Your bounce rate is people that come to your site, visit one page, and then leave. Those are the visitors you want to minimize the amount of those visitors. You want them to hang around a little bit longer and become high quality visitors and potentially even translate into customers. Yeah, so here's a couple examples of two different primary structures you can consider. So one's the horizontal approach and the other is the vertical approach. Really depends on your content. So for something like a personal site or maybe a site for a basic organization, the horizontal aspect might make more sense. You have an about page, you have a team page, a home page, that kind of stuff. Whereas something for like a learning management system, the second option might be a little bit more applicable because you have a course and then you have a module and then you have a lesson. And you're typically not going to go into a lesson without at least navigating through a course or something first. So these types of, depending on the type of content that you use, will really determine the organizational hierarchy that you decide to use as well. Okay, so now we know all the bits and pieces that go into building a site. Let's look at some of the tools that can be used to do such a thing. So these are the names you've probably heard of, probably maybe even had experience with. Shopify I put on there. I'm going to actually just fade that out for a sec because it's kind of applicable, kind of not. It's kind of its own thing. So what these allow you to do are, they're all in one page builders. So they deal with everything from your hosting to your domains, to your styles, to your backend updates, to your customer management system, often sales, all kinds of stuff. It's all under one roof. And then these came about basically because there's a need in the market. Building a website was too complicated. There's too many moving parts. So Wix kind of came on the scene with Squarespace, and they both created these products, and they've been in competition since, and they're both pretty flushed out and high quality offerings. So what they let you do is basically build a site with a drag and drop editor. So you get a bunch of templates to choose from. You can move buttons, move images, stuff around your site, create pages, and do it all through the editor. Your site lives on that platform, and it serves your site moving forward. All of the designs are pretty responsive and mobile friendly, and it's pretty great. That being said, there's some caveats that come with using these platforms, so I'm going to get into. So the pros are really easy to use. They're drag and drop page builders. They're very straightforward. If anyone here has used one of these before, they kind of know what I'm talking about. Like, you can figure it out pretty much in an afternoon of building a site. No hosting required. So they handle all your hosting for you. There's no hosting bills, nothing to manage on that end of things. They automatically scale to traffic. So these are built on cloud hosting. So if your site suddenly hits a massive spike in customers, your site's not going to go down. The platform will automatically scale to handle it. That being said, you might need to upgrade to a different pricing package to take advantage of those kinds of features. Domains are often included. Even if it's a purchase through Squarespace or Wix, you can add a domain to your site and not have to worry about configuring it. It happens automatically. Again, one of those tools that just makes it easy for new people to use. And finally, the designs are very responsive. They're all mobile friendly. They're adding new designs constantly. So even though a lot of people use Squarespace and Wix, it's pretty easy to create an original looking site without worrying too much if someone else has used the same template as you. When we talk about colors a bit more, we can get into how to differentiate that a little bit. But now let's get into the bads. So monthly fees. So instead of paying a hosting fee, you're now paying Wix, Squarespace, or Shopify to manage things for you. So what you're saving on one end, you're losing on the other end of things. So that fee is covering your hosting. It's covering all kinds of different aspects of the platform. What that kind of means, and then this kind of feeds into the next one, actually, you play by their rules. So with these platforms, this is where I personally find issue, only because I'm pretty technical with this stuff. They don't give me a lot of room to play around. There's no sandbox per se. If their platform doesn't support the feature, you probably can't do it. Shopify, it's a little bit different because you can build apps for Shopify, but in terms of Wix and Squarespace, you're very locked into what they offer. So for analytics, you're forced to use Google Analytics. You can't use any custom analytics platforms. If you want to use different form systems, screw you, you can't do that. That being said, these aren't necessarily limiting factors, especially if you're building a new website, but just things to consider if you want to scale and grow down the road. And then that's the third point. There's no escape from these platforms. So once you decide to build a site on Wix or Squarespace or Shopify or any of these awesome all-in-one builders, you're really stuck with them unless you want to rebuild down the road. So for a website, like a personal site or an informational site, that might not be that much of an issue. Like, I can rebuild my own personal site pretty quick. But if I open a Shopify store or Squarespace store and I'm suddenly doing, I don't know, 500, 600 orders a week, a month, whatever it is, moving that to a different platform is going to be a massive pain in the ass if I ever decide to do that. So again, just something to consider. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pricing of how that stuff works, but just know going into it that you're really playing by their rules because you don't actually own the thing. Okay, so let's talk about Shopify, because Shopify is different. A lot of people go into building Shopify sites thinking, oh, this is a really cool way to build an e-commerce platform. And it is, but Shopify is a lot more than that. So it's more than an e-commerce website builder. It is your entire order management system. So that means everything from your inventory to your stock management, to your shipping, to your warehousing, to your logistics, to your delivery drivers. Every aspect of your business is going to run through Shopify. If you're okay with that, then it's a really, really good platform for that. But if you're only looking to do an online store, it might not be the best avenue. It's still worth exploring for sure, but you just need to consider that it can do a lot more than that. So like, for example, a web store on Shopify is considered one of many sales channels. So you can add in-app purchases as a sales channel. You can add Amazon links as a sales channel. You can really sell anything through Shopify, and that's kind of what it's built to do. That being said, it's really good at building e-commerce websites. And it's good for businesses with under 3,000 SKUs. So from anyone in this room, that's probably more than applicable. And I was actually on a webcast with the Shopify last week, and they're adding all kinds of new functions for managing bigger stores. So more organization with lots of products, more bulk editing tools, that kind of stuff. So they're hoping to enter the space of around 3 to 10,000 SKUs that services like Magento are currently kind of capitalizing on or monopolizing. And it's the biggest downside to Shopify is it can be expensive to grow and scale. So here's a little example of how the pricing calculator works for Shopify. This is all in US dollars, but just imagine it's Canadian because it scales identically. So for a shop that gets in $5,000 in revenue per month, they're using Shopify payments because Shopify payments and credit card payment providers like Stripe are almost the same price. So from this example, it works really well. So as your revenue scales, your pricing for your credit card payments goes down, but you are moved into higher Shopify brackets. So for under $5,000 in sales, you can do the basic Shopify. Over 5,000, you do Shopify. After that, it's Shopify Advanced and then Shopify Enterprise. And those are all hard limits based on Shopify, and they're all based on your actual income in terms of revenue. And then your payment processing is kind of where you pay out a lot, and that number actually scales down as your shop grows. So it can be expensive, but it can also really fit into your business model, and it does take away a lot of the actual business management side of things of running a e-commerce store. So it really depends if it works for you and the types of services that it offers. If it saves time for you, it's probably worth doing. Okay, now let's get into the cheap side of things. So you don't want to have Shopify, you don't want to pay for Wix, you want to own your own stuff. WordPress is probably for you. It's free, it's open source. You can contribute to it. You can learn how to code and do updates for it. You can really dig yourself in the space. It's self-hosted, so it lives on your server, and if you want to leave and go somewhere else with it, you own your site. All of your orders, all of your previous SKUs, everything is already included in your store. You're just moving to a new host. So that's huge. Most hosts offer WordPress installers. So something like SiteGround or OVH, once you buy your hosting, you can say, hey, I want to use WordPress, click a button, WordPress is set up on your site. So it's very similar in the Wix side of things where it's a site builder almost ready to go, but you do own it. And there's a really big community of developers that are working on free open source WordPress products. There's all kinds of paid support you can get. There's all kinds of paid add-ons you can get. And I think like approximately a fourth of the websites running on the internet run WordPress. So it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's been around for a really long time. And while people are slowly starting to move away from it, it still definitely has a place in the market, and it's a really useful tool to use. That being said, there are some big caveats with using WordPress, and that it's way more technical. So you need someone on hand that has a bit better understanding of what they're doing, or someone who's willing to learn. Their documentation is really good, but there's more involved. There's more to set up and stuff. So if you're looking for a plug and play solution, one of those all-in-one builders might be a little bit better choice. More time spent managing your website. So things like updates and things need to be manually reviewed just to make sure your site didn't break. So again, if you're managing your store, checking your orders periodically, that kind of stuff, it shouldn't matter too much anyway because you'll be in the back end, but again, something to consider. And then potentially slower websites. So what I mean by that is with great power comes great responsibility. So what you do on your site will impact your visitors, and you're free to do whatever you want with WordPress. So if you want to add 10 megabyte images to your site, you can do that. If you want to add 40 different random plugins to do random stuff, you can do that. But you're going to pay for that when you do. So it's really worthwhile to consider just your page speed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. And then in terms of actual building your site, there's all kinds of drag and drop builders very similar to Wix, WooCommerce, or Squarespace that you can use. I personally have had tons of experience using Divi, but I've heard really, really good things about Elementor, and I've used Visual Composer and Beaver Builder in the past as well, and they're awesome. So it's almost the same experience. Like you have a bunch of pre-built modules that you can drag onto your site and use where you see fit. Now, so you want to have a cheap store, but you also want to do e-commerce. So that's where WooCommerce comes in. So WooCommerce is a free plugin for WordPress that turns your WordPress site into an e-commerce store. It's cheaper in the long run than using Shopify or any other platform because you're not paying monthly fees to use it. And your only credit card fees will be through Stripe. You're not going to be paying a third party to handle those credit card payments because you're going to be using your own payment processing. It's fully customizable. So if you want to hire a developer to build some cool like custom thing, that's doable. Like for an example, I'm building a plugin for a customer right now for his visitors to design their own products on the store with their own color schemes, their own, I can't get into too much detail, but they can basically change the product on the fly and then send it to the store to create a new product, creates an order number, and then it's sent off to the producer. So that kind of stuff you can't really do in any other platform. You need to have a place where you can do custom stuff. So WooCommerce allows that big time. And then again, you own it. So I'm a big advocate for owning your own stuff. And I think that owning your own, if you, like your business is your business, it's your income. So I think it's important to own, and it's dangerous to put in the hands of other people. If Shopify or WooCommerce or WordPress if Shopify or Wix decides to change their pricing model down the road, you really have to just go roll with the punches on that. If they decide to remove a feature or even remove you from the market, your product isn't fit to sell for some reason, say you're in a regulated industry, there's all kinds of different risks you can have with not owning your own platform. Whereas if you own it, all you need to do is change hosts if something bad happens, and you own all your stuff. So you have all your backups, all that kind of thing. That being said, again, it's very similar to WordPress in that it's complicated to set up. Not complicated, but there's more involved. You need your own hosting, you need your own maintenance. So that being said, do you need hosting? You're probably wondering. You need hosting if you don't use a software as a service platform. So if you don't use Wix, don't use Squarespace, you're going to need your own hosting, but that's okay because I've got some really good recommendations here for you. So all of these providers, so DigitalOcean, SiteGround, OVH, and So You Start, they all offer everything from shared hosting all the way up to cloud hosting. Their prices are very competitive, and I've used all of these in the past personally with success. Then the other product is, there's one called Amazon Lightsail. So what that is basically Amazon's trying to get people to use its platform to get into the Amazon Web Services. So they're offering cloud servers for $5 per month. You can only have one. So if you want to run your own personal site, it's a really good option for that. And that scale, I think it scales at 10,000 or 100,000 site hits per site per month. So no one should have any issue with those limits, especially if you're running your first business or first personal website. That being said, I also offer hosting. I've been building websites for a while. And one of the things I realized when I entered the space was that the market for hosting kind of sucks. And to get very specifically customized hosting is hard. So hosts don't want to give you access to the configuration. They don't want to give you access to anything that's technical. So for people like me, it's been challenging finding quality hosting. So that being said, we started offering our own hosting. So right now we offer hosting through Site Club, and I'm actually breaking that off into its own hosting division. So we're going to be launching our own hosting company. So if you need something, talk to me after the show, and we can probably get you a better deal than any of these. Okay, so colors. So this is something to consider when you're actually, before you start building your website. Use colors that match your brand. You can use tools like Adobe Cooler to pull images from a palette, or sorry, pull palette from an image. So if you already have a logo or already have branding documents done, you can just upload your files and it will give you a color palette that works for your brand. And then some builders, I think Wix and Squarespace and a lot of WordPress themes do as well. They allow you to just pull in a color palette and it'll automatically fill things out for you. So when you're in your selection tool, when you're building a new module, you can select your predetermined colors. So then I'm just going to give you a little demo of the tool that I use. So this is Coolers. So what this does is it generates a random color palette, and then you basically keep pressing spacebar to create new colors as it loads. So let's just let that load up. Okay. Well, that's I'm having a little issues getting that to work. But basically what happens, it'll bring up about 5 different colors. You can press spacebar to randomize them, and you can pick colors one by one to lock them in as you want to use them. Okay. So let's talk about accessibility for a little bit here, because this is another really important thing that gets overlooked by a lot of people building websites. Use real fonts, not images. So anytime you want to use a fancy image with a banner with text on it, make sure you also have real text on that. There are a lot of accessibility tools that are called web page readers, where the actual device will physically read out the text on the page for people with visual disabilities. So if you have images on your page, it can't read those. It needs to know what that image is so it can tell the person who's reading it what they're looking at. That also being said, have your headings in order. So it will read through your page based on the headings. So make sure that you're using the proper tags for your headings. And then adding alternate text to images and buttons again, so people can hover over it, have text that their device can read for them rather than relying purely on visual cues. So there's all kinds of tools to measure this. I use one called Wave. It's a web accessibility evaluation tool. And what that does is it shows you all the errors, contrast errors, alerts, features, structural elements on your site. So for like a contrast error, this is something people don't really consider, but like different grays on different gray texts, people that have visual disabilities have a really hard time seeing light gray on dark gray text. So it'll highlight those kinds of issues, things that you wouldn't really consider. And then a lot of these platforms allow you to add accessibility compatibility mode, which will add like high contrast mode, large text, that kind of thing to your website. So images, please don't use Google Images. I see it happen a lot where people grab images off Google. You're not supposed to do that. You don't own the rights to those images. Use images that you have the rights to. So these are 3 services that provide you copyright free, totally free images to use. They're really high quality. They're community sourced. They're really good for background images, that kind of thing. And then, so Unsplash, Pixabay, and Pixels are the ones that I personally use. And then before you upload your images to your website, you're going to want to compress them, because whenever your visitors visit your site, they're going to load all the images on your site. And if they're on a mobile connection or a really bad Wi-Fi, it's going to really impact the experience for them. And it won't really matter that much if you're looking at an image on a small screen. So just compress the images with one of the tools included in the references section at the end of this deck before you upload your images. So that's kind of a segue into this. So page speed, it's a really, really important aspect of your website. And I personally think it's the most important aspect of your website, because there's nothing worse than loading up a website and not loading, pop-ups coming up that slow down the page, images that take forever to load. As a user, that's my worst experience. So for me, one of my primary objectives is to make my websites as fast as possible and to show up on your screen as soon as you click it. So what impacts page speed? The physical server or its internet connection. So where your server lives makes a huge difference to how fast your site's actually going to run and how good their internet is. Page size. So if you load a bunch of images on your site, those images are loaded every single time the page loads, and that's really going to drag down the performance of your website. External resources. So use fonts that are built in the browser. Don't load crazy fonts for your website. If you really need to, there are solutions that you can use, like SVG files, and you can chat to me about that afterwards, but you shouldn't need to use any externally loaded fonts or assets for that kind of stuff. Scripts, all that kind of stuff can all be taken care of under the hood. DNS lookups, that's basically whenever your site has to grab something, it has to look up where that thing is first. So the more things on your site that are hosted externally, the slower your site is. And geography. Has anyone here ever gamed and played on an Australian server? It's a miserable experience. It's really, really slow, because there's a huge latency back and forth every single time. So to reduce that, one of the ways we can get around that is getting multiple servers and setting them up in different areas, or using something like cloud hosting. And there's a lot more that goes into it. This is one of those rabbit holes that goes really, really deep. So things you can do as a new website builder to keep in mind when you're building your first site: resize and compress your images before uploading them. That's going to make the biggest difference to your actual page size and your perceived loading speed. Use standard fonts, use Google fonts, use web fonts. They're all built in. There's a couple hundred you can choose from, so you shouldn't really need to load anything else. Only use add-ons that are necessary. I see this a lot with WordPress sites where people will realize, oh, I want to have a cool text on my homepage, and they find an add-on to do it. And then they want an image pop-up, and they find another add-on to do that. And before you know it, you have 40, 50 add-ons in your site that are all being loaded every time you load the page, and it really slows things down. So just consider, hey, do I really need this on my site? And is this, where is this used? Is this used enough for me to justify it? And then these other things are more technical things that you can do, but they all kind of reside in hiring a specialist, someone who understands how pages load and who can actually do performance upgrades for you. So that being said, let's take a quick look at what a page speed looks like. So this site, GTmetrix, is what I use. One of the few that I use to actually test out sites. So this is my personal site, just a little portfolio for myself. So as you can see, it's got pretty good ratings. The only issue I see is this serve scaled images. And that's because I added my profile image and I just pulled one from Twitter. So if I look at that, it'll say, hey, you could reduce this by from this size to this size and save 97% of the size. So if I do that, I'll probably hit 99 on both scores, which is a really, really good score. So when you're building your site, use tools like this and test them often. Every time you make a really big change to your site, run it through GTmetrix and just see what it looks like. It'll show you how fast it loads on different devices. It'll show you a breakdown of what loaded on the page, all kinds of stuff. It's technical if you want it to be, but it also does give you pretty high, like a good overview of if your site is fast or not. Even these letters, if they're green, they're good. If not, it'll highlight the issues that you need to fix. Okay. So that's basically it for actually building your site. So by now you'll have a little bit of a website built, ready to go, and you want to get people to show up. So a couple questions you're probably asking yourself: how do people find my website? How can I see who's visited them? And how can I actually contact my customers? So let's get into each of those. So primarily, the way that people will discover your site is you're going to submit your site to Google, and then you're going to start showing up on search results. The way that you submit your site to Google is your page builder, whatever you use, if it's Wix or Squarespace or WordPress, will create a sitemap, and that's basically a file that has every link on your site. You send that to Google, they visit all the pages, their bot will crawl all of the links on all of those pages, and then within a couple of weeks, you will start to show up on Google search results. You can't change the results, you can't change the ordering of them, no matter how much you pay me, we can't put you at the top of Google search results. So I get these kinds of questions all the time. You're really in the whim of Google and their algorithms. So there are a couple tips and tricks you can do to improve your search optimization, but in terms of actually ranking, it's very, very secretive as how the process works. But that being said, they do give you a full platform to demo search testing. So it's called Google Search Console, and what it does is it gives you an overview as to what people are searching for to get to your site, the pages on your site that have issues, any events on your site. So if any pages threw errors for specific users, all of that kind of stuff. So if I click on the performance section, my apologies, my computer's being a little slow. If I click on the performance section, I can basically see things like pages that are valid, pages that aren't valid, pages with errors, which pages are covered by the search crawler, all of that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you to check this out for your site and get it set up basically as soon as you build your site. And then you can see what people are searching to find you. So for us in the last month, or last 3 months, people have been looking for SME Entrepreneurship Center, SME VC, Paul LeBlanc, Christopher Webb. So these are all the actual search hits that we have had. If I click on search appearance, this will show where we actually live in search results. So rich results, so these are results with text, not just a link. Like they might have other links to our other pages on our site. So we show up in 24 places, and we've been clicked on through these 1,800 times in the last 90 days. So and you can set up alerts and stuff through this platform, so you can really get a good idea of how your pages work. This one checks mobile usability. So as you can see, we have no errors and 56 valid pages. So these basically give you a usability score for mobile for all of the different pages on your site. So this dashboard kind of acts as like a primary overview for the health of your website. It shows where the issues are happening, where speed issues happen, all that kind of stuff. And it gives you other tools as well. Like you can see things like crawl stats. So how often the Google search bot actually visits your site, all kinds of stuff like that. It's pretty in depth. So back to this. So that kind of goes into my next topic of search engine optimization. So search engine optimization is an entire topic on its own. It's the deepest rabbit hole you can get into in web marketing. And there's all kinds of really good resources that you can dig into on it. But the big takeaways for it are have relevant content, add new content frequently, and be mobile friendly. Those are really the big things that you can do. So Google really rewards pages that update their content often. So adding something like a blog or like a industry research, or maybe you post links of cool stuff you found related to your industry. That kind of stuff is really, really good at amplifying your search results. Then other things like having a fast website and attracting real visitors. Google can tell what kind of visitors you get, if they're real or not. Bots, if you start sending bots to your website to try to improve your rank scores, your page visit scores, you're actually going to be penalized. You're not going to be rewarded with better search results. That used to work maybe 15 years ago. That's been long closed down. So yeah, so we just monitor the Google Search Console often and check it out, and it'll warn you if things are wrong with your website. Okay, and now, so people are visiting your site, people found them on Google, you wanna actually see where they went and what they did. That's where Google Analytics comes in. So basically the way Google Analytics works, you add this code to your site. There'll be a place in Wix or in Squarespace or WordPress to just pop that in, and that code will load every single time a visitor loads a page. So when they load a page, they send to Google, hey, this is who I am, this is where I am, this is how long I've been here, here's a bunch of information about me. And then Google uses that to basically amalgamate it into a dashboard that you can use to really get a good understanding of how people use your website. So I'll just show you a little bit on how Google Analytics works. It's incredibly easy to set up, and Google actually has a course that you can do. It's a full walkthrough where they give you a pre-set up Google Analytics account. And it's actually their certification course. There's 3 different levels, so I'd highly recommend doing it. If you're ever thinking about running a website, running a Google Analytics account is just as important, if not more important, because it really gives you an understanding of how your customers behave. So for example, if I want to change this, I can say, okay, let's see how this site performed over the last 28 days, and it'll show me the average users, the sessions, bounce rate, all that kind of stuff. This map over here is my time of day map. So I can see that people typically visit our website during the workday. They typically visit from Canada. They view the site primarily on desktop more than mobile, which is actually surprising because most websites are mobile, or have the primary audience be on mobile. So this kind of thing gives you a really good overview. So if I want to go into acquisition, this shows me how people find my website. So you can see if your search campaigns are working. You can see where you're appearing on social media results, all of that kind of stuff. So as you can see, organic search, we have 79 hits. This is the last week. We have 54 people visit us directly, 20 visit us through socials, and 13 visit us through referrals. So if I click on something like social, it will take me to the different providers that those leads came from. And then I have tracking set up in Google Search Console that I can see what those keywords were that people use to find my website under something like direct search. I can also see the behavior flow of people on my website. So for people operating e-commerce stores, this is very vital because it shows you where your customers are dropping off. This will be a really good example if people are going through your checkout, putting something in their cart, make it almost to the end, and then most of your customers drop off before the checkout process. Maybe there's something wrong with your page. Maybe it doesn't work for all visitors, or maybe it's not intuitive enough for them to actually complete the sales funnel. So this will really highlight those drop-offs. So as it loads here, you'll be able to see. So this shows on the left here where people actually showed up on the site. So this is their entry point to the website. And then as I click and go through these different trees, I can see all of the reds are drop-offs. So these are the people that dropped off, and then these are the people that moved on through. I can add segments. I can filter it by any demographic. I can filter it by time of day. I can do all kinds of different stuff with it. As I said, this is one of those rabbit holes that you can really dig into and get really interesting results out of. It's worth digging into the documentation and doing the course to really understand how it works. And then Google Analytics also gives you things like site speed, site content, all these kinds of analytics tools to see how your content's structured in their eyes, in their search result eyes. So very, very important platform for managing your site. Arguably the most important thing that you're going to use to grow your online business. Okay, and then that will take us to the last topic, which is email. Oh, go back. So a lot of people come to me asking how to set up email for their business, and it's kind of a loaded question because a lot of them actually need more than email. A lot of them are looking for places to do document storage or to do shared docs, or even set up with an Exchange server. So you want to be able to do hookup meetings with other people that use Outlook. So there's all kinds of different platforms you can use for this. These are my 3 kind of levels. So at your entry level, you have email only. So that's like your typical webmail that people would have got back with internet providers when they still provided email. So it will give you like your website, email address or an at your website email address, a basic web portal login, and it only does email. You do your email through there. You can set up with your phone, but it doesn't do calendar sync or anything like that. Then your next level is your hosted exchange, as we call it. So that's basically a Microsoft Exchange account that you pay for that allows you to do things like calendars. It allows you to do file sharing. It allows you to do all kinds of other aspects of the email process. So if you want to integrate with like a university and have calendar sharing, this is the option that you kind of need to go with. And then at the top level, we have G Suite. So what G Suite is actually, it's called Google for Work. It's recently been rebranded into G Suite, and it's the full Google platform, but for your business. So you basically register with like your name at yourbusiness.com, and you get a Google Docs account, a Drive, Forms, everything for your business. So you can create shared folders for your business. You can create folders for your clients that only they can access. You have access to things like Jamboards for organizing your content. You can use their private Hangouts feature called Meet, which is really good. The paid version is significantly better than the free version. And it's a really good platform. The only thing is it's slightly expensive. So all of these pricings are per user pricing. So depending on what you go with, it really does impact your bottom line. But that being said, there's a lot of potential value that can come from using a more expensive solution. Like using the full Google Suite, for example, you don't have to worry about your form intakes on your website, or you can use Google Sheets to manage your inventory tracking, that kind of stuff. So there's ways that you can make it work for you in the long run. But I personally use Google for Work, and I really recommend that others use it as well, especially getting into things, because it's a really good, like a central place to keep all of your business related activities, whether it's your business documents, your client documents, or your client shared folders. It really helps. So that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope you guys had some good takeaways from this, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm going to hang around here for about 15 minutes if you guys want to chat about anything or have questions. And like I said, the slides are available if you want to go to that link. And on my last page, you'll see a bunch of different resources for everything that I talked about today. Yeah, so if there's any questions, feel free.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was a very interesting presentation.
My pleasure.
I had a question about the kind of websites that you personally build. Are you more into large e-commerce websites, or do you do websites that have to do with marketing, or what kind of, do you have like a specialty? How does that work?
Yeah, so I kind of build whatever. There's kind of two categories of sites I build, primarily like informational websites, so like company information, that kind of thing, or e-commerce platforms. And then lately I've been getting into app development as well, so that's part of my wheelhouse now too. But yeah, so e-commerce, for example, like that's kind of where I like to spend my time now. I find it really interesting, especially with things like Shopify on the market. There's so many cool things you can do with e-commerce that regular websites don't really let you do. And the customization aspect is really interesting for me. So that's kind of like what I like to do now, but I'll still gladly build a personal website or anything else for anyone. I just like building stuff. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had a question, Alex.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just wondering if you are sending out the slides or how we can get these from you.
Yeah, so actually the link that you can see on your screen right now will link you to the slides, and then they'll be, if you want to add them to your Google account, they'll be there forever for you.
Oh my God, I was like not seeing this link. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, found.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions that they think of after this, feel free to email me. I'm always willing to help people set up their websites. I love doing this kind of stuff.
I had a question about pricing, if you could answer this. So if I'm gathering the correct information from the slides, to develop a new website that doesn't have a lot of traffic, we're looking at a cost of between $100 to $300.
Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, you can get it done for a lot cheaper, right? Like for every option that I showed you today that has a paid option, there's probably a free one on the market. There's just a lot of caveats that come with it, like not being like not white labeling your site. So you can get a free website with web.com or a bunch of other providers, but you'll have a logo in the bottom corner saying powered by. Like, so if you're okay with that kind of stuff, you can get away with doing a lot of this for free. this presentation was more tied around people wanting to launch their first business website. And in my eyes, having like non-white labeled business websites can seem unprofessional. So I like to remove any branding logos. That's why I kind of recommend at least paid options. And paid options also typically give you support for any of those aspects of the business. So if you're someone who can really run by the seat of your pants and want to do it yourself, then yeah, free options. There's a lot of things out there, but one of the things that you're going to be paying for regardless, though, is going to be either hosting and your domain. Like those are two costs you kind of can't really get around.
Alex, I didn't see Pixo was on the list.
No, Pixo has been long. Pixo and GeoCities and MySpace and all of those are in a different presentation.
Are you telling me Angel Fire is not a legitimate business strategy?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. So if we don't have any more questions, I guess I can just leave it there. Like I said, feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the screen, and I'm always willing to help people launch their websites. So let's get in touch.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you,
No
Alex.
worries.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Take care,
Okay,
everyone.
goodbye now.
Bye.